Hello and welcome to our today's Coffee and Consulting. My name is Friederike Ruch and I have the honor to be your today's host. Our topic is project assignments of service providers and looking or analyzing the immigration, tax, and social security implications. Welcome to that event, and I hope that you also find the next 30 minutes very interesting, and hopefully you get a confirmation that whatever you do currently is exactly what needs to be done, or maybe you get the one or the other tip for your daily work in order to make sure you are fully compliant. We have a full program for today. So before we start, just two more things. One thing is you can download the slides for later on during the presentation, as well as it will be recorded. So you have also time to actually listen to it again later on. You will find it in our YouTube channel. Also, in case you have any kind of questions to today's topic, please just write them down in the question box and we will answer them later on by email or by calling you. So let's start. We have seen in our daily practice that actually project-based assignments of service providers have a couple of things which are tricky and we have to look at a bit more carefully, as well as you may have seen as well a couple of challenges during the last couple of months, years, where above all immigration authorities are becoming more stricter, and therefore it's good to maybe basically review the current setup, the current way you deal with it, and see whether that is aligned with whatever we find. Before we start to see that we are all on the same page, we will discuss today really only project assignments. So if, for example, someone is employed in country A, has his employment contract with an employer in country A, is most likely also during the time he is on assignment sent over to country B, still residing in country A, gets a salary from country A. So there's no change of the employer itself. It's just really on a work-based topic. He or she will be sent to work in a different country. And now the working in the different country is not with an affiliated legal entity or subsidiary or connected company, but it is on the client side, where sometimes the one or the other thing is you have to be a bit more careful, as well as the major topic in everything is usually also the project agreement, which lies behind that project assignment, so that everything is in order. Also, the individual or your employee working then at the client side is completely more or less on its own, so there's no employer or no affiliated HR or whatever who can support him there. Also, we usually have those assignments in country where maybe the local HR has no knowledge about it or no know-how, so it is therefore also quite important to have someone supporting you who actually knows everything in that country and can support you the best based on your requirements, your wishes, and your needs. As the matter is a bit complicated and there are a couple of things to where we have to look a bit closer to, we thought we will do that today based on a sample and go through the different topics. So the today's sample we have here is a Norwegian national, Luca Rimini, who shall go on an audit project as a management consulting to work at a client, Alpha Insurance AG in Zurich. Luca Rimini is employed at Management SA in Rome. He also lives in Rome, gets his salary paid out in Italy from Management SA. That will not change during the time he is working at the client side at Alpha Insurance. The project agreement states a duration of 90 days with the possibility of extension for the period 1st of May to 31st of December. And in the project agreement is indicated that he shall be working physically in Zurich for about 90 days. Now, his situation is a bit more complicated based on private matters, meaning during the period January to March, he had been already with his wife and kid to Switzerland as his parents-in-law are living in Geneva and they had been quite sick. So they spent already in that period 105 days in Geneva. The private part is for then assessing in regard to social security or immigration. There's no influence in that. However, it has an influence if we then look later at the tax bit. Therefore, even if you as an employer say that's not relevant to me, whatever the individual is doing personally, from a tax point of view, and we will look at that in a moment, you have always to look at the whole picture, at the whole year. Now, in that context here, it's from an immigration perspective not relevant. However, if the individual would be a non-EU EFTA national, that would be of relevance, because if we then would need to get a Schengen visa for the individual, those 105 days will make it a bit more complicated in that scenario. Therefore, let's just start with the immigration part. We understand he is employed at Management SA in Italy, so his employer is abroad, and he's working in Zurich for up to 90 days. Now, there are a couple of different possibilities to get a work permit for him, and I think we are quite clear that he definitely needs to have a work permit because he is performing work, even if it's not for his employer, but if it's on a client side, still a work permit is required. And in principle, we have two options. One is the 90 days online notification, or on the other hand, the second option would be the 120 days work permit. Both are possible scenarios, or both are possible permit types, based on the fact that it's just up to 90 days he should be working in Switzerland. In a first step, you would say, okay, that notification process, which is an online thing, which is quite easy to be done. There are no governmental fees. And even if we look at the salary level, it's a lower salary level required as compared to the 120 days work permit. Might be the easier option. Now, the issue with it is that with the notification process, you have to indicate or notify each individual day the individual is working. So there is a lot of administration behind it. In some cantons, you have to be careful with it because they definitely require that you first do the notification process before you start thinking about using a different work permit type. Now in Canton Zurich, if you can defend your case, you can easily also request from the beginning already a 120 days work permit. Now for requesting such a permit, one of the key criteria is that there is a project agreement with at least a duration of 6 months when you file the application. So in that case, if we would file the application, or if the application had been filed in April, easily it's still for 6 months valid, the project agreement. That could be quite a good possibility. The 120 days work permit usually would then be issued, and now that's for Canton Zurich valid, for a 12 months period. Even the project agreement might not be until that end. There is also the possibility that the authority says, oh no, we just will issue it until the end of the year, which would be not an issue because the contract will be also only until the end of the year. It will be then prorated, the 120 days, and based on that, he can flexibly use those days whenever he wants and needs to be then in Zurich. The reason why you maybe tend to first use the notification process is because you do need to request, file an application with the Labour Market Authority. If it's an EU EFTA national, like here, Norwegian national, so Luca, for him we just would need the approval from the Labour Market Authority in order for him to start to work in Zurich. Now the approval for the Labour Market Authority usually takes 2 to 3 weeks after you have filed the application. So within that period, you should get that approval, and then the individual can start to work. In some other cantons, you just get one approval, so you have to wait until you get the final one, as well as if the individual would be a non-EU EFTA national, then also the process or period would take much longer, because then also you would maybe need to get a visa claim. So that takes usually 4 to 6 weeks or even up to 8 weeks. The beauty of it is there is no registration necessary. So basically, with the approval you receive from the authorities, the individual is fine to work. The required documents for it are listed down here. The key part is definitely also the project agreement, which we need, which we listed down at the first page, which needs to be signed, which should indicate whatever the project is about, as well as needs the indication of the individual on it. If the individual who should work in the end in Switzerland is not indicated, the authority will not approve the labour market application. So that is really the key requirement. In our sample, we said that it will be for up to 90 days with the possibility of extension. So for those assignments, project assignments, you still have all the different permit types we have for any other type of permit as well, or type of assignment as well. So there is no difference whether the assignment is internally, like a company transfer, or whether that is on client side. There is no problem at all in getting that also approved. The Swiss salary requirement is one thing which the authority are quite careful with and are looking in detail also about. One thing which is quite important to understand, if the person who performs now the work here in Switzerland on that project assignment, if it's an employee like Luca Rimini, who is employed at the Management SA in Rome, for him, we definitely have to calculate the Swiss equivalent salary and then looking at if we request either the notification or the 120 days permit, we can use the lower quartile for the equivalent salary, whereas if we request an L or B permit, we have to use the median. That is true for Canton of Zurich. For the other cantons, it's a bit different. They make a difference between notification and 120 days permit and above. So there you have to look at which canton you have to send the individual to. Also, when deciding or when you need to decide in which canton you need to file the application, you need to look at where the individual needs to work, and that is actually the place you need to request the work permit. In case you should work for different locations, you would have to file for those different locations. Usually you do that with requesting additional approvals for the other locations. There's only one exception, and that is for sole trader. So if you have a sole trader coming to Switzerland and working here on an assignment, then there is no need of running the Swiss equivalent salary calculation because there's no need to indicate that in the notification process. And later on, you just have to indicate the equivalent salary which he receives. Basically, the general steps in regards to be compliant from an immigration perspective is really the key part is trying to get a project agreement with the longest possible duration, because keeping in mind that the work permit will be only usually up to the period which is indicated in the project agreement. Also, you can only request permits for people indicated in the project agreement. For anybody who is not indicated there, you will not be able to get a permit for. You will have to calculate the Swiss equivalent salary and also then pay a difference if there is a difference. The Swiss authority usually are not requesting that you need to have paid that in the months the person had been working in Switzerland, but you need to have proof that you will pay it or have paid it then at a later month or whatever. Checking also on additional salary components, which is added on the slide before, because the individual is still on assignment, even if it's a project assignment and working at the client side, you will have to pay for the lodging, hotel, apartment, whatever, as well as for the travel. One thing which I haven't indicated earlier, which was stated on the first page with immigration, is the 8 days exemption rule. Now, if you send someone to Switzerland on a project assignment for only up to 8 days in a calendar year, then you can get him or her exempted. Depends a bit on where the employer is situated, and but that is something you should keep in mind, that there might be a possibility that you don't require a work permit depending on what you need to do in Switzerland. Then let's move on to the tax part. We've seen in our situation or on our sample from Luca Rimini that he has his residence in Italy. His employer is in Italy. He is Norwegian national, but the salary is being paid out in Italy. Now, we said he will be working for up to 90 days in Switzerland, and we also had the indication that he had spent already during February to March of 105 days. So all in all, he had been here for 195 days. And that is exactly where we have to, or why you need to actually look at any day he had been staying in Switzerland. So even now, if in the contract it was indicated, or in the project agreement, better to say, it is indicated that he's only need to be here for up to 90 days, the reference is there to the work days. Now, in case he would be staying then over the weekend, because maybe he would be working Friday as well as then Monday, so staying Saturday and Sunday in Switzerland as well, those days had to be considered as well. Now, we have now assumed that he only will stay those 90 work days plus the 105 days before, where he was privately in Switzerland, which leads us to above 183 days. Based on the fact that we have a double tax treaty between Switzerland and Italy, there's definitely no double taxation. However, there will be, because he is staying over those 183 days in Switzerland, there will be a limited tax liability which has to be considered. Which is also quite clear because he keeps his residence in Italy, there is no change of that. Therefore, the unlimited tax liability, meaning the tax liability for his worldwide income and assets, remains in Italy. And the key part is in that situation, the 183 days rule. Now, we would have to calculate the effective days he spent in Switzerland in the calendar year. Keep in mind that Switzerland will use the calendar year, but some other countries actually will either use the 120 days permit or even the tax year as reference. The second requirement is there should be no salary payment from Switzerland, which is in our case definitely we can say that is yes, we have met that condition because his salary will be still paid out from Italy because he's working here only for the client. There are no employment costs charged to an affiliated legal entity or permanent establishment in Switzerland, which is also the case, or at least we have no information of that. But if we say management SA in Rome has all those costs, they will not charge that to Switzerland. Everything will be kept in Italy, and also in the end, the invoice sent to the client in Switzerland will be sent out from the Italian legal entity. In our situation, the problem is that not all three conditions are met because he is spending more than those 183 days in the calendar year in Switzerland. And due to that now, he will have to file a tax return in Switzerland because there's no legal entity here in Switzerland for him because he's only working at the client side. Therefore, he will have to file a tax return, and then on a prorated basis, his employment income based on the work days now in Switzerland, he will be taxed. But the tax return has to be filed. Keep in mind that if you need to be, or if you want to be compliant from a tax point of view, that you look at the 183 days rule, see also about, or keep in mind or consider the days the individual had already spent in Switzerland or will spend also on a private basis, because that is key in the end in order to look at the tax liability and to know exactly whether there is a limited tax liability in Switzerland or what the situation is. Seeing as well whether there is a double tax treaty between Switzerland and the country the individual is residing, and then making sure that in case there are any tax consequences, you have found a solution or have indicated a solution with the employee so that he is in the end not being worse off working in Switzerland based on a tax point of view. We usually suggest as well that you have someone supporting you in that matter so that the individual will not have to take care of, as well as it's a bit tricky as well with the different tax systems. So usually there is then support in the home country required as well. Now, Social Security wise, we said he is Norwegian national, and that is from a Social Security perspective. One of the key requirements or one of the key things we have to look at, the nationality, the country he is residing, as well as the country he is working in. So we have, he is Norwegian national, working in Switzerland, residing in Italy. We are not having three countries which are all EU member states. So Norway is an EFTA member state. Therefore, we have to look at whether there is a bilateral agreement between Switzerland and Italy. And yes, there is. Therefore, for him being able to work in Switzerland and remain in the Italian social security system, that is not a problem at all. But we would need to request the certificate of coverage for him, and it's not an A1 because he is Norwegian national. If he would be Italian national, for example, then the A1 would be required. Now, there is a bit then a difference of what the consequences are here in Switzerland. In principle, it doesn't matter really, because in both scenarios, Luca or the individual would be able to remain in the Italian social security system. From a social security point of view, we have always to look at which agreement we can actually use for the project or for any kind of assignment or any kind of situation. And in Switzerland, we have a difference or differentiate between the EU agreement, which is only relevant for EU nationals or Swiss nationals, and only for EU member states or Switzerland. The EFTA agreement is only relevant for EFTA nationals, EFTA member states, and the bilateral agreement is then only for the member states as well as then for all nationals. So there is no difference on the nationality of the individuals. And only if we can't fit the situation in one of those agreements, then definitely there is no social security agreement in place. We have to look at the other side. As long as we have an agreement, then in principle, all of them, all of the situations are more or less similar, meaning we just have to request the applicable certificate. Either it's the A1 or the certificate of coverage. Now in that scenario, here's the certificate of coverage. The difference is that if we have a bilateral agreement in place, then usually they are not all the different insurance sectors are indicated in the agreement, meaning we cannot request the exemption from everything. Now, there are two things we always have to look at. One is the part about accident insurance. We have to look at the situation specifically if it's not indicated in the agreement between the two countries, as well as we have to look at the health insurance part, where a separate application has to be filed for the exemption of health insurance. Usually that is not an issue at all if it's an EU member state, and also that petition or that application has only to be filed in case someone is residing in Switzerland. What is important is that the certificate of coverage, or the A1 if it would be an EU national, is something the authority are really looking at, and sometimes even, or some cantons actually have even started to request that when we file the work permit for the individual. Now, Zurich is not one of those cantons who actually already requesting it. So the important part is, from a social security point of view, to really look at that we have the A1 or the certificate of coverage, and in case there is any kind of additional social security or insurance part to be looked at, that we look at that upfront and make an assessment and to find a solution for it. The last point in our sample is about the labor market control. So a labor market official is now visiting the Alpha Insurance AG in Zurich and asking at the reception for Luca Rimini. The labor market official is checking in the meeting with Luca Rimini then on his work permit. He's asking for the employment contract, asking how many hours have you actually worked every day, so timesheets. He wants to see as well his pay slips, and seeing that in case there was a salary difference that had been paid, as well as he wants to see the certificate of coverage. In that meeting, Luca said that he had not all the documents with him, and depending a bit now on which documents he had not with him or were not ready, and depending on the situation, the labor market official has the possibility to just say, okay, you just need to provide the missing documents to me, and it's fine, you can still continue to work. But we also had already situations where the labor market official just said, no, the individual needs to stop to work. And one of the key things usually is about the certificate of coverage, or A1. If that is not in place and they can't show that, then usually the labor market official says, okay, good, you need to actually stop to work, and as soon as you have it, you can continue to work. So keep in mind that that is really something you need to have in place. If we look at labor market inspections, then usually they happen more often if you had requested a notification before, because with the notification process, there is no real check from the labor market authority about the application, and therefore the inspections are in those cases more than for if in case you had requested a 120 days permit, because that is then went through the approval process from the labor market authorities, and therefore they do not really send out labor market officials for that to check on it. In some cantons, you can do everything in writing, and in some cantons, actually, really, the person is coming also to the client site. You cannot really prevent that. The only thing what you can do is really to try to have all the documents always ready. So in case that happens, you can just send them over. And you should be aware that also Swiss firms and companies are aware of the increase of those labor market controls. So it's not any longer that is only on a construction site, but also on really, you can find that at every other firm. Doesn't matter in which industry the firm is, it can happen everywhere. The sanctions on it, it is the employer, so it's basically if the labor market control happens here at Alpha Insurance in our sample, it's not Alpha Insurance which will be fined, it will be Management SA in Rome who will be fined in case something went wrong or they did something the wrong way. Also, usually the start is with really issuing fines, and I think the matter is really in case something like this happens that you just really cooperate with the authority and just provide them with the documents and the information they require. So basically for our sample, to sum up what we just went through is Luca Rimini will need to have a work permit for the days he's working on the project. Key part is the project agreement should be for the whole period. He should be listed in the agreement, so to make sure that he will get actually the right permit. Requesting the 120 days permit, which will be the easier part, because he can then flexibly come to Switzerland whenever the project needs him here. Requesting the certificate of coverage, so that to make sure he remains, first of all, he remains in the social security system in Italy, but also in case of a labor market control, that is one of the key documents. Social security wise, checking on the accident insurance, whether he is definitely covered under that. Then salary wise, you would need to run a Swiss salary calculation and make sure he gets the equivalent Swiss salary paid out, as well as the cost reimbursed or paid for lodging, for the apartment hotel, as well as for the travel. And then lastly, about the tax part, make sure you have someone who can support your deal with the tax affairs in Switzerland for filing a tax return and then paying the days accordingly on a prorated basis here, as well as making sure that there is no double taxation than in Italy. So with filing the Italian tax return, that is also done in the way to avoid the double taxation. With this, I come also at the end from our today coffee and consulting. I hope you were able to take away the one or the other thing. If you have any questions to that, the topic is a bit complicated because there are so many different things to consider and make sure you look at them. Please reach out to us. We are happy to answer all your questions in that regard, as well as support you in case you have any necessity on that. With that, before we close, I just would like to draw your attention to our next seminar, which will be in the Hotel Bauer Lac about assignments to abroad. and focusing really on the right insurance coverage, social security coverage, so that to avoid any kind of gaps or inconsistency, as well as on the tax part. Our next webinar will be on the 26th of August, will be held in German, and we'll be also having this topic because we see on a daily basis how important it is and how many questions there are still about the different aspects. And the next Coffee and Consulting will be on the 1st of September, so very soon, and about the different hybrid cross-border employment possibilities. So I hope to see you soon at one of our next events, and otherwise I wish you a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and hopefully we soon have also a bit of better weather again and feel the summer. Enjoy the summer and hope to see you soon.